The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power in the creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. We got ourselves a program, viewers and listeners. It's going to be a blast. We got great stories. We got great co-hosts. We're going to be joined in the second segment by our guest this week, composer and pianist Pete Calandra. Really excited for this interview, folks. He's my favorite kind of composer. I love many a kind of composer, but my favorite kind of composer, like the ones that are really at the top for me that make me smile, are the ones that make iconic sports themes. And Pete Calandra has made some of the most iconic sports themes that you know and recognize. And I'm really interested to hear about the process that goes into creating that kind of stuff. So that's coming up in the second segment. Do not go anywhere. That's going to be a blast. But right now, let's go ahead and bring on our co-host this week. Always happy to be chatting with musician, investor, frontman for Gideon King and City Blog. Gideon King's here. Hi, Gideon.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
You love a good sports theme too, right, Gideon? Like there's nothing like hearing your favorite song to really set the tone before whatever sporting event you're going to watch. Like that, it just puts you in the right mood. And our guest, Pete Calandra, has made some of the best ones.
I mean, when I watch Knick games, I gotta turn the TV on to catch the sports music. Otherwise, my adrenaline's not pumping. I'm not feeling engaged. So you need the sports theme, man. You need it.
Yeah, music and sports, a good sporting event needs the right kind of composer to really set the mood for you. I'm excited to hear about the process that goes into making a sports theme, because obviously, Gideon, you're a songwriter. I'm not. But I would say that when you're making a song for, say, Gideon King and City Blog, that the process for making just a song for a band that you record on an album versus making a song for a game, for a sport, for a TV network's coverage of a sporting event or the Olympics or the World Cup or something like that, has got to be a very different set of skills, a different process.
Totally different. Someone once asked me to write something for a sports thing, and I started, and I actually called him after like 45 minutes and said, "Look, I'm the wrong guy. I can't get it done. I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't happening. It wasn't coming to me. It's a completely different animal."
Well, and then they went to John Tesh, and we got the NBA on NBC theme. So nothing great was lost there.
Yeah, no, it's no problem.
Or they went to Pete Calandra, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's going to... All right, so good. I'm glad to know that you are as excited about this interview as I am. In addition to being a sports composer, he's also written countless songs for movies and television. He's got a new album coming out, or should say a new album that is out, Spirit. It's a great listen, and that's coming out. So we're going to talk to him all about that, get some advice from him. It'll be a good time had by all. I wanted to get your thoughts, Gideon, first thing on the agenda, on AI. Any of the loyal viewers and listeners of Break the Business know that you would be what we would generously call a healthy skeptic when it comes to the role of AI in our world. You're perhaps have some trepidation about it, or perhaps outright vitriol towards it, depending on what day of the week it is. And I gotta say, when I saw the latest videos that have been rolled out by OpenAI announcing the new release of this ChatGPT 4.0 system that they've put out, I immediately thought of you, because you're always telling me about how you think AI is going to take over. It's kind of destroying humanity and all this stuff. And now I got to say, I kind of listened to a lot of what you were going to say. I was thinking, man, maybe Gideon's right that AI is dangerous. It's coming to kill us. But now, after seeing this GPT 4.0 or 4.0 launch, I'm now thinking that's not a risk anymore, because I think, Gideon, that AI is in love with us. and is kind of flirting with us and is sort of into us. And so I'm not at all worried. I want you to watch this video. This is the latest version of ChatGPT 4.0, and just listen to how flirty it is.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Rocky. I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm awesome. Listen, I got some huge news.
Oh, do tell. I'm all ears.
Well, in a few minutes, I'm going to be interviewing at OpenAI. Have you heard of them?
OpenAI? Huh? Sounds vaguely familiar.
Oh my
Kidding,
God.
of course. That's incredible, Rocky. What kind of interview?
Well, it's for a software engineering role, but I just need to know, do I look presentable, professional?
It's looking at him on the camera.
Well, Rocky, you definitely have the I've been coding all night look down, which could actually work in your favor. Maybe just run a hand through your hair or lean into the mad genius vibe. Your
Well-
enthusiasm is what's really going to shine through.
I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to throw this on. What do you think?
Oh, Rocky, that's quite a statement piece. I mean, you'll definitely stand out. Though maybe not in the way you're hoping for an interview.
Okay, I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Did you hear the way it was giggling, Gideon?
First of all, you're not even asking a question. I'm just going to start talking.
Go for it.
The bottom line is AI is the phoniest person I've ever met. Okay, like she's just one of the phoniest people I've ever met. That was the most bizarre postmodern crazy thing I've ever seen. Apparently, from what I'm reading or what I've read, it responds in 240 milliseconds, which in most cases is faster than most people respond to input and conversation. So, I mean, man, I'm not even going to go negative on this. I'm not even going to go positive. I'm just going to say it's here. We are now in a postmodern swamp, and where we end up. And listen, it's impossible to surf on a swamp. And so where we end up here, I have no idea. It's completely freakish. I guess I'm a speciesist. And what I mean by that is I still covet and value, and I'm still in love with our species, as flawed as it is. And I'm simply not in love with this new species that we've created, AI. And so, yeah, guilty as charged. I'm a speciesist, Ryan. If you want, by the way, if you want me to leave the show right now, I don't know if you want speciesists on your shows. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, you're going to get
I don't know if you
canceled
wanna
for
do
your
that.
speciesism.
Totally.
I mean, how could you say that was fake? That was the most real sounding thing. I'm kind of in love with her. Like, I mean, in all seriousness, like if I weren't in like a healthy, committed, like real, authentic relationship with a person, and like you find me in like the times of my younger life where I was perhaps like lonelier, I could absolutely develop a really unhealthy relationship with that thing. Did you hear the way it was just giggling and just knew all the right things to say and was like kind of flirty?
I did, and I'm a little disturbed that, I mean, first it was Taylor Swift, and now it's this woman on AI. So I don't know. Listen, I don't know what your wife thinks of all this, but like it's out of hand on your part. And I mean, man, it was pretty amazing. Well, look, they clearly have it trained to respond to facial expressions and visual input. It's
That
no
was
less
wild.
It's no less than mind-bogglingly capable. We have imperfect human impulses, but we have godlike perfect technology now, or at least we're trending towards it. And that's just a terribly frightening cocktail.
Well, I mean, I am in awe of the speed at which this is happening. I feel like the progression of AI is increasing at an increasing rate. When I think of where ChatGPT was 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and like now we have her, Samantha's character from the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix, but we have it like, 50 to 100 years ahead of schedule. I don't know what time period Her was supposed to be based in, right? But that's supposed to be like a semi-dystopian future. But that was Samantha. That was Her from Her.
Right. No, It's incredible. And I if you asked me to be sort of put on my Nostradamus hat, I guess what I would say is in due course, whether it's solving for the genetic sequence or genetic mutations that, cause cancer, or solving for other diseases or mentation issues or whatever afflicts human being, whatever terrible things afflict human beings, I think a lot of good will be done with this technology. But my feeling is that in our imperfect, impulsive, dangerous hands, first we have to go through an extraordinary hellstorm before we can get to the good that this thing can bring us. And let's not forget that AI, at least on an intellectual property basis, at least in my opinion, is the greatest example of larceny, conversion, and theft in human history.
In terms of taking like all of the art that it's being trained on.
Meaning the spirit of Bono creating a song. Sure, his songs were built on, John Coltrane, and John Coltrane was built on Beethoven and so on. But at least there was some unique spirit that Bono or Bob Dylan or Taylor Swift or whoever brings to their output. But AI is a completely cold amalgamation of everything that everyone else has done. And so there is no essential, incipient, first moving, first principle spirit to this new species that we've created. It is just an unbelievably lightning quick thief practicing conversion left and right. By the way, that's super negative. There's lots of positives that'll come with it.
Like the cute laugh that it has.
You know what? Obviously, you're so smitten with this woman.
I mean, I'm a sucker for a cute laugh, Gideon.
We cannot have a serious conversation because you're just you everything is eclipsed by your love affair with this woman. It's impossible. I don't know that you're fit to do this show tonight, but Ryan, I'm not sure you're prepared. Let me be honest.
Well, I am kept up at night by what this kind of technology means for art. In all seriousness, I remember a few months ago when we had Elisa Rockdock on the show, who is a professional voiceover artist. And she was talking about how when she sees technology like this, she's wondering of the future of her industry, right? She does voiceover work for video games. We are going to be at the point where video games using AI are going to create games where you can interact with non-playable character NPCs and have unlimited dialogue with them that can go in infinite directions because you're not going to be interacting with pre-recorded voiceovers that are recorded by humans, but instead are going to be talking to an AI that can generate infinite responses to whatever you tell it.
Oh yeah. If you need a soundtrack for a show, some cheesy show like Bridgerton on Netflix or whatever, like if you need a soundtrack. You don't need humans writing a film score with strings and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of people are going to say you do need it. You'll always be able to tell the difference. That's what they said about triggered sounds for pianos and violins and so on. And now put Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea or, Vladimir Horowitz, not with us, but put him in front of that software and they can't tell the difference between a triggered key sound. So we may want to fantasize that our utility is everlasting, but this thing is challenging our utility, particularly in terms of artistic output or any kind of output. I mean, certainly I know law firms, who are using AI for all kinds of things that paralegals and associates would normally do. And man, I don't want to go on and on. It's just incredibly scary, as is all new technological development. But man, this is like this geometric leap away from anything we've ever had to manage or encounter, in my humble little speciesist human opinion.
I do want to get your thoughts on other kind of groundbreaking, disruptive business and entertainment news. I mean, we could do a whole show on this, but I do want to get your perspective on what's going on with TikTok. We've been talking about TikTok the last few weeks. Congress recently passed a law basically forcing ByteDance to sell its interest in TikTok, or it's going to, get banned in the United States. They've already filed a First Amendment lawsuit against TikTok. I imagine you've been following this case pretty closely. You've probably talked with a lot of colleagues who might be at least peripherally involved with what's going on. I want to get your thoughts on a lot of this, but I mean, first of all, like the idea of a forced sale, right? If you were the owners of ByteDance, or if you owned that interest in TikTok, I mean, a forced sale is not really a true sale, right? Because if the buyers know that you have a gun to your head, and so I imagine that's going to have a pretty significant impact on what your sale price is going to wind up being if you even wind up selling.
Well, so just for your listeners, we got to put this in perspective, first of all. There's an organization called CFIUS. CFIUS is the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. We also have the FTC and we have the DOJ, and we have a variety of other regulatory agencies in the United States that cause businesses to divest parts of their businesses when they think there's undue concentration or antitrust violations. So it isn't unheard of in the least for a company that does business in the United States to be asked to sell some or all of their business. Okay, so this is not a wild departure from things we do all the time. In fact, we have the most aggressive antitrust enforcers almost in the history of our country under this administration. So it's not wild from that standpoint. The difference is when Procter and Gamble or some biotech, that makes organ rejection drugs is buying another biotech that makes organ rejection drugs, the average person isn't affected by it on the street. It's sort of this sideshow antitrust thing going on. But in this case, TikTok is threaded into, heavily perfused throughout our society and into our lives. So it's front and center in terms of the news. So my thoughts are that I'm super schizoid on this. On the one hand, I hate when the government under the influence of xenophobia, particularly causes private entities damage or visits on them forced processes. On the flip side, there's demonstrable evidence that this weapon of mass destruction that is social media is being used by those that are not our friends, whether China or Russia, to manipulate us, to gather data on us, to cause us to think things that are not true, or to cause us to distrust each other in the United States. And we know right now that there's an extraordinary sense of disunion in the United States with protests, with the political rancor, and so on. And so to have enemies control this incredible thought instrumentation, I can understand why some people want TikTok out of the hands of the Chinese. I can understand it. Now, as to your initial question, since I didn't answer your question, I sort of went all over the place. A forced sale is not a market dynamic thing because the buyers know that the entity has to sell. Yes and no. All it takes is for two people to be interested, and Lord knows we've already seen Frank McCourt and a few other people on the tape, or rather in the news, saying they're interested. All you need is a little bidding tension, a little competition, and the fact that it's a forced sale will be out the window. But man, this is a wildly complex topic, and I'm convinced of both sides of the argument every time I speak to a different person. But if you put a gun to my head right now and said, is this cool from a legal, social, political, and national security standpoint to force this? I think I would say that TikTok is a cancer and it should be removed. So net, if I were asked to vote on this, I think I'd vote yay, or would have voted yay. What do you think, man? I mean, like, I can be convinced, either way.
I mean, so when you say TikTok is a cancer, and certainly like all social media platforms, can have a lot of negative impacts on our society. I mean, certainly I've been pretty addicted to staring at my devices ever since social media was a thing. And that's particularly been the case with TikTok. Now, like my lawyer mind can't separate whether TikTok is bad versus whether I think this is a violation of free speech. And for me, like that just kind of trumps it, right? Because if the First Amendment can be overcome simply because we really, really don't like how it's being used, then that kind of defeats the purpose of the First Amendment. Like if everybody agreed with with everybody else said or did, or what media platforms existed all of the time, we wouldn't need a First Amendment to protect those speakers and those platforms. That's kind of my feeling on it.
On the other hand, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, but as I've said on previous episodes, I am sympathetic to what the politicians are voting on. Like, what they have kind of said from the beginning was, look, if you can read what we've read, if you are seeing the same policy memos we are about how dangerous this platform is and the people who are controlling it, you'd vote to ban this app too. And I'm sympathetic to that view. Yeah, how sympathetic to overcome the First Amendment? I don't know about that.
No, and I'm actually tortured by the same kind of countervailing forces myself. So I'm with you on that. But I think you have to ask yourself if the preponderance of evidence that's being submitted to these people who are voting on this issue suggests that TikTok is amounting to a fifth column. I don't know if you remember that expression. The word fifth column was a World War II thing where it was essentially a force within a country that was undermining the country, and it was being controlled by someone in World War II days. It was all about spies and so on. But is TikTok a fifth column? And I guess at some level, I have to accept what these politicians are saying, even though we know politicians are not always pure in terms of how truthful they are. I guess I have to accept at some level what they're saying, which is that there's too much evidence that it's being used to destroy the currency of our realm. And the currency of our realm is trust. And so if it's causing disunion, breaking down trust, then in fact it's a threat to national security. And if it's a threat to national security, then I'm sympathetic with those that would want this forced sale. So man, complex issue. I tend to believe that it is being used for pretty nefarious purposes, based upon some really smart people. At least they tell me they're smart, that have opinions and seem to be closer to the situation than I am. But who knows, man? It's a hard one.
Don't get me wrong. I would love to see I would love nothing more than the government to actually take an active role in regulating social media platforms to like address things like, okay, they're just stealing our data and they're doing all these horrible things and, they're, ruining the youth. And like, if we could see some actual comprehensive legislation that addresses these points, not just for TikTok, but, for the American companies too, that would be refreshing. I feel like this is just sort of just like swinging a baseball bat at the problem, but not actually addressing all of it. Just like, oh, TikTok, bad, Chinese, get rid of that, but not actually addressing what's happening across the board with social media. Like, Instagram is destructive too. Maybe not in the same ways that TikTok is, but like the fact that those platforms can remain largely unregulated and TikTok gets entirely banned, it seems imbalanced.
Yeah, no, it may very well be imbalanced. On the other hand, if we're going to worry about illegal immigration and the fact that we might let people in who don't share American ideals, whatever that means, if we're going to worry about Russian interference in elections, if we're going to worry about all of these myriad of foreign influences that may seek to undermine our way of life, whatever that means, then if what we're being told is true about TikTok, that the data gathering and the disinformation and the misinformation is just voluminous, and it's in the hands of either an enemy or certainly not an ally, oh boy, that's it's something I would consider voting yay for. But you're so right. And by the way, one other thing that you sort of briefly alluded to is like one of the favorite like indoor sports, bipartisan indoor sports, is bashing China. Whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, they love to get up there and say, China's responsible for the fact that you fell off your bike yesterday. So it's you're absolutely right that it's like when in doubt, if you're in a bad mood, blame China.
I mean, that's a time-honored American tradition, is finding
Absolutely.
ways to
Totally.
blame our national problems on foreigners, for sure.
Of course.
So we've hit you with a couple pretty serious topics, and that's not fair to you because I know Gideon King likes to have fun and talk about like the less life or death things. Like, is AI destroying us? Is TikTok destroying us? Let's have some fun. Let's bring back one of my favorite segments, the Gideon King Wheel of Topics. So a little bit of backstory for the viewers and listeners. Whenever we have Gideon King on the show, he sends me just like paragraphs of topics he wants to talk about, and I don't know which ones to choose from. And so I let Lady Luck decide. We take all of the topics that Gideon King has sent my way over email. We put them on this beautiful wheel that the television audience is seeing right now. And then we spin the wheel to see what Gideon thinks of that particular topic. So we're going to go ahead and spin the wheel of topics, and we'll see what it comes up with.
I'm nervous.
Me too. Oh, here we go. I'm excited for this one. The question on the wheel landed on, will rock and roll ever come back and be as prominent and influential as it was before? Are we going to see a rock resurgence at any point, Gideon King? I feel like you're rooting for that.
I mean, if we define rock and we think of rock as anything from Led Zeppelin to John Mayer, where people are playing real instruments, even Ed Sheeran, I think no, because we can't. I mean, there will always be niche bands, and there are now, and there will always be the jam band world, which harkens back to sort of live music and real instruments and some degree of improvisation. But I don't think so, because the modalities of producing music and making music have almost outstripped the human process, in a sense. I mean, like when I talk to 23-year-olds and I'm like, "Where are you going tonight?" and they're like, "Well, we're going to a concert." You know, my mind immediately thinks of like, you know, U2 or whatever, Hippocampus, or an actual band on stage. But a lot of the time, it's tracks and a person up there with a laptop, which is cheaper and more economical. And also the sort of social justice role of music has faded to some extent, and that was heavily intertwined with rock and roll. So I'm not saying rock and roll is dead and will never return in some form, but is rock and roll the way we understood it from the Police, not really a rock band, but from the Police to Led Zeppelin to America to even John Mayer? I mean, is that going to make a comeback and be the full thrust of what music is to young people? No freaking way.
I mean, when I think of just how much the process of music composition and music creation and music performance has changed, in the sense that, like, you don't need your buddy who's a guitar player, your other buddy who's a bass player, and your girlfriend who plays the keyboards to help you make music. The fact that all of this stuff is done on computer, there are people making whole albums on their phone using GarageBand. There's people using AI to help them make songs now. Everything is technology based more than ever before. You're not just in a room in your parents' garage jamming stuff out. Like, as long as technology has made the music creation process smaller, easier, and more efficient, I think rock and roll inevitably has to be a casualty.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the only thing I will say is when you go, like, we're playing the Rochester Music Festival in June this year, and we just played some gigs in New York, and we have an 8-person band with saxophone players and guitar players and everything. And I will say this: when people see other human beings playing instruments, and the energy that transmits, the physics of it, I don't think it will ever die, because there's something so elementally special about that. But because of all the factors that you just mentioned, it's just hard to imagine that that's going to supplant Drake on stage, or Taylor Swift, who's up there singing to tracks and dancing. Like, it's just man, it seems unlikely, as you say, for those reasons.
Powerful stuff. We got a few minutes left, Gideon, and I got another topic here that you sent me that I think is absolutely worth giving some attention to. So let's do it now before the break. You've been talking a lot to me lately about what you've sort of put together in your own mind about best practices from working with singers. Like you have singers in your band, when you produce albums, when you work with singers to make new songs. There's obviously a psychology to it. Zach Sloan, our other co-host, has talked about this, like his process for getting the best performances out of singers. We've had listener questions about this in the past. So love to get your perspective on this. When you're working with singers through your band or when you're producing, what are some of your best practices?
I mean, the thing about working with singers, and I've worked with some pretty well-known singers actually, and what I've noted is they are not workhorses that you can just ride. You have to understand that they're almost like athletes. If you play people 48 minutes in the NBA night after night, and you do what Tom Thibodeau did to Derrick Rose is going to get injured. So the first thing you have to respect is that the voice, the human voice, is it's like a little muscle struggling to survive. And you have to respect the time that they need off. You have to realize that after they eat, their voice might be different. You have to realize that every single day their voice is different. So the first thing you got to know is it's a physical phenomenon, an ever-changing physical phenomenon, and trying to force it to be something other than that is a mistake. So sometimes you have everything set up and the singer's like, well, my voice is just not good today. And you're like, wait a minute, like I paid for studio time. There's 30 musicians in the room. We have an engineer here. Doesn't matter. You have to listen to singers when they say their voice just isn't feeling right. A. B. Singers, one of the most famous producers in the world, who's one of my very, very close friends. And I mean, he's produced everybody from James Brown to Paul McCartney to the Go-Go, everybody. He's always said, he jokes and says singers are crazy. You have to manage them. And I don't think singers are crazy, and he doesn't either. But I guess what I'm saying is that when you manage a singer, and when you have a studio session with a singer, you really have to encourage them. They're alone in the isolation room singing. There's a lot of sort of self-consciousness. It's a very strange thing to do, to push all this energy into a microphone. And you have to just let them work it out themselves. And you have to be incredibly encouraging. And giving direction or your opinion too soon, it is a huge mistake. They are both a sensitive instrument physically and emotionally. That's just what I've seen from singers. And when they're comfortable, they're some of the most amazing people I've ever seen. The good ones can do all kinds of things that are just incredible. But when they're uncomfortable, the simplest singing task can elude them. So the entire magic is to make sure they are comfortable as hell. If it's the lighting in the room, if it's the kind of mic they're using, call them in, say, do you like this mic? You want a ribbon mic? You want this? You want that? And you've really got to get them to a point of comfort. So I think working with singers is the ultimate, psychological, managerial task, because it's they're just sensitive instruments emotionally and physically. And you have to, you also, by the way, have to let them make the song their own, even if you wrote it. If you write a song and you have this exact digital idea of how it should be sung, and you transmit that to a singer, you won't get the best results. You'll get the best results when you say, this is my bass line, top line, meaning the melody, Ryan, for the tune, but this will work out best if you make it your own and you bring yourself. Because why hire someone who's an individual if you're not going to ask them to bring their individuality inside the song? So those are the experiences I've had, and they've actually been great experiences. But there's only so much you can push them. There's only so many takes you can get from them, and the conditions have to be right. And if they're not, you just have to reconcile with the fact that you're going to come back another day and do it when the conditions are right. It's a weird process, man. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting.
It sounds like it commands a lot more emotional energy as the producer, as the band leader, than I would expect if as opposed to say working with just like the guitarist or the drummer.
Oh man, it's totally
or
different. You can't
Something
even-
like that.
Like that's sensitive too. But like if you got a saxophone player, guitar player like me or whatever, laying out solos, you can just bang them out. And yes, you get self-conscious. I get much more nervous playing in front of a microphone with a guitar or recording into the box than I do playing live. Right? Like when I have to play a solo into the box, it's like I have to do 100 takes. I get nervous. I get inside my head. But it's nothing like being a singer. They're front and center. They're the whole vibe of everything. So I mean, listen, you'll ask your guest, of course, who I'm sure has worked with singers, and it'll be interesting to hear his thoughts. But man, incredibly fascinating process working with singers. And when it works, there's nothing more gratifying.
Before we go to break, I'd like to flip it around because I think a lot of the people who are listening to this show are singers and are familiar with all of the dynamics that you just mentioned. But for the singers out there, what would you tell, if you could tell them anything about how to make the most of that experience to be able to give the producer or the band leader what those people need to get the best performance out of you, what might you tell them?
Never let confidence prevent you from really learning the song. The most annoying, I'm just being completely honest, the most annoying thing is when you get a super well-known singer to sing one of your songs and you're all excited because you're going to get lots of streams and it's cool to have this collaboration going. And then they show up for one day in the studio and they barely know the tune. And so you don't even get the bet. By the time their voice is tired out, once their voice is actually tired is when they know the song. And that right there is like a calamity. So what I would say to singers is learn the song amazingly well and then throw it out and make it your own. But you got to know it inside and out as it's envisaged by the writer first, and then you can make it your own and sort of throw it out. Oh, kind of like Miles Davis used to say, like, learn all the music theory, learn everything, and then throw it out the window. So similar thing, man, gotta learn the song. Can't come in and think you're such hot shit that you're just gonna wing it, because if you don't know it, you don't sound good on it initially.
The satellite radio audience appreciates that editing you just saved him right now with that delightful act of spelling.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
Great insight. No, you did exactly what you're supposed to do there. Great insight, Gideon King. Let's take a quick break. We're going to be back with Pete Calandra here on Break the Business. Don't go anywhere. Break the Business is presented in cooperation with Ryan A. Kairalla, PA. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA is a law firm providing transactional entertainment legal services, including contracts, business formation, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida. rkpalaw.com.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to Break the Business. Ryan Kairalla here with Gideon King, just having a grand old time. You can check out Break the Business on all major podcast platforms and live streaming platforms, including our new home at volume.com. Thanks very much for that, Real Estate Volume. And you can also check us out on satellite radio at SiriusXM 145, wherever you are taking in this program. We're so glad that you are. Thank you for checking us out, and thank you for telling a friend about us. Gideon, let's go ahead and bring out our guest this week.
Let's do it.
Our guest this week is an award-winning composer and pianist who has released 15 albums, has scored over 100 films, and has written over 2,500 compositions for television, including sports themes for NBC Sports, Fox Sports, ESPN, and more. His latest album, Spirit, is available now, and you can find out more about our guest's work by visiting www.petecalandramusic.com. We are so happy to welcome Pete Calandra on To Break the Business. Hello there.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh gosh, we're so excited to be chatting with you. And man, the audio and video setup, top notch over there.
Well, I teach at the Aaron Copland School of Music, which is part of the City University.
Oh, cool.
And most of my classes are online. So I've, over the past 3 years, worked out something that looks and sounds good for the students.
Well, I feel like we're going to be your students right now, learning a lot from you, and just really blown away by your setup there. So, I mean, you sound like you're a New Yorker through and through. I want to kind of take you back to sort of the beginning of your career with New York as the setting, to kind of give people a window to how things started. You started out as the conductor and music director for the original New York City production of Little Shop of Horrors. And I've always wanted to ask somebody who was involved with that project on the ground floor this question. When that show first started, did you have any inkling that it was going to be the phenomenon that it did? Like, you took one look at like the talking, singing plant and like with the Motown singers and the dentist who is a drug addict and thought to yourself, this is going to be a hit.
Well, first of all, let me just correct something there. I was in the show for 5 years. I started off, though, subbing for Robbie Merkin, who was the original keyboard player, and he also orchestrated the show. And then after I did that for a couple of years, I then became the pianist and the music director. But I was there at the beginning. I started subbing only a month or so after the show opened, and I do know that a lot of people were blown away by a lot of the creative portion of the show. They were really blown away by just what a phenomenon it was. And so I know that the producer of the show apparently played Audrey in a high school production. Yes, and it's like many, not to denigrate that, but many people say stuff like that to me. My students come in, I played that show when we did that production of that.
Producer Lauren, if you have the courage to give us a little Audrey to Pete Calandra here, we'd love to hear it.
Yes, doctor.
It's always like, Mr. Mushnick, right?
That's pretty good. Yeah, I have nightmares about that.
Me too.
Oh gosh. All right. So, well, thank you for indulging us there. I mean, it must have been quite the experience to get to be in the early days of that particular program.
Yeah, it was also, not to interrupt, but it was.
You go for it.
I just to set the scene of that, right? New York City had been in through the 70s. And it was, a battle zone. If you look at, I went to college in the 70s and into the early 80s, and getting on the subways was dangerous. You had the guardian angels keeping people protected. And, it was a war zone in New York City, right? And it was, and then like the 1982, when the show opened, it was sort of like things started moving and changing, and the city started coming back. And where the show was set was in the East Village, which had a long, rich history of Yiddish theater, in the early 1900s and through the middle part of the 1900s. And, this show sort of helped to revitalize that area by bringing people down there every night for 5 years. And so you had all of this energy that was going on outside the show, but the show in that physical area of the East Village was really a part of the fabric of the city at that time. And then when you put into effect that, first of all, it's a great show, it's incredibly well written, the songs are great, the lyrics and the book by Howard Ashman and Alan Menken did the music, were tremendous. The original cast was incredible, And, most of all the replacement casts that came in were equally great. And, so there's all that. And then when you're in a show that's in a tiny little theater for a long time, everybody sort of is in everybody else's business, and not in a bad way most of the times. But the women and the men had small dressing rooms. So a lot of times everybody was congregating in the green room down in the basement. And so you'd have actors there, you'd have the musicians there, you'd have the crew there. And as a result, because we were so physically close, we also became a close-knit family. And we're still, that was 40 years ago that I was in that show, right? And we're still friends to these days. To this day, I'm going to California in a month for a week, and I'm going to visit the stage manager. We're still in touch with each other. We have had many get-togethers. Before COVID, it was at least once a year we'd get together in the city. People would come in from out of town, and we'd sort of plan these, get-togethers and dinners and stuff. And so you make these lifelong friends. That's like really the most important thing to me, is the connections that you make when you're doing a show like that. It's different when I was on Broadway because everybody is so separated. I made friends with the musicians. Miss Saigon, I made friends because I did the cast rehearsals at the beginning before the show opened. So I was there learning the show with the rest of the cast, and I became friendly with them. But just in general, when you get on Broadway, you're so separated out from all the different departments are sort of in separate worlds, and you sort of know each other, but you don't. There's no cross-pollination like there was with a small off-Broadway show in a very intimate theater like the Orpheum on 2nd Avenue in St. Mark's.
Yeah, gosh, that brings me back to my time in New York. I feel like I'm right there in the East Village again. I'd like to talk to you about the songwriting process, Pete. You've written over, I see here, 2,500 compositions, which just seems impossible to me. I just can't imagine how somebody can just create that much art. Although I hear about these stories all the time. We had a guest on our show, Jonathan Mann, who's the Guinness World Record for most consecutive days writing a song. He's written thousands of songs. I kind of want to learn more about how folks like you are wired to be able to create that much. I've heard this notion of creativity being a muscle, where the more that you use it, the more that you create, the stronger that muscle gets. And so you can create even more, right? And conversely, if you stop creating, those muscles start to atrophy. Is that sort of the basis for how you're able to make this much music, that you just continuously exercise that muscle by continuing to create?
I've heard that before. I think that you can't really have a generalization about something like that. It's not like a one size fits all for every human being. What I will tell you is that when I was younger and I had to put pencil to paper to write notes out onto a manuscript paper, I found that process incredibly cumbersome and antithetical to actually being creative. If you think about the people that I was highly influenced by, which were mostly jazz musicians, improvisers, and as far as literature goes, the Beat Generation, Kerouac, I actually met and performed with Allen Ginsberg, and things like that. They sort of worked on a stream of consciousness level. So, for example, when a jazz musician is performing, they're not exercising creative muscle. They're getting out of the way mentally of their body, and they're just letting the music flow through them. So the second that I started getting more involved with music technology and letting my skills as an improviser take over, the more I was able to create quickly and high quality, because I've been improvising on the piano since I was a child. And, you get to the point where you can improvise almost complete songs on the spot. And I write instrumental music. Let's get clear about that. I have written pop songs, but I'm clearly more comfortable writing instrumental music. And then you go, you get it inside the computer, and then you go back and it's like some of it is really good that doesn't need much work, but some of it you need to go back and massage it and clean up stuff and then orchestrate it and do things like that. And it really helps me personally that a lot of my training as a younger musician was to be fluent in a wide variety of musical languages. So to pay for college, I played in commercial bands that were playing in bars, that were playing weddings, top 40 bands. There were disco bands at the time. I was also playing in jazz ensembles, big bands, small groups, funk groups. I must have been in like 50 or 60 bands over a 3 or 4 year period, maybe 5 or 6 year period, because I started playing at clubs before I was 16. And playing all these different styles of music was sort of a complementary education to my formal academic education, where at the Copeland School of Music, where I'm also a graduate of that, where I was studying classical music, counterpoint, orchestration, theory, and getting composition lessons with like incredible musicians. And so, I had these two paths going on at the same time, and they helped out when I started getting involved in writing commercial music for television, because I started out working and creating production music. And I worked for, the first job I got was creating highlight music for Fox Sports. And so, it was a certain style of music I had to write. And I couldn't quite do it all on my own. So I had to enlist somebody else to work with me, a guitarist and an engineer, because this was in the late 90s. My skills weren't up to the task yet. And so after writing about 40 or 50 of these tracks, this sort of led into more work. And then at some point, I made the decision that I needed to be able to just do all this stuff myself as like a one-stop shop, right? So the next big job I got was in 2000. In 1999, I worked for a year writing underscore music that NBC Sports was going to be using in the 2000 Olympics at Sydney. And I had to write music in all sorts of styles: world music, orchestral music, solo piano music, some sort of semi big band stuff. And so, I did a lot of the stuff using sample libraries and just getting people to my apartment and learning how to engineer and record them. I've been playing guitar my whole life, but I never really practiced it. I started getting more serious about adding guitar as like an instrument that I could record. So all this stuff started happening. And then I just worked on my engineering skills, mixing and working at it and getting feedback from my clients and just getting better at all these skills. And this is one of the ways that I've been able to produce so much music. Like if you think about 100 films, right? Now, not all of them are feature films. Some of them are 60-minute films for television, a lot of them. Some of them are 30-minute. There's a lot of short films that I did for the Special Olympics and a few other sporting things. But if I'm doing a film and there's 15 or 20 songs, cues in a film, that's times 100, that's 2,000 right there. I've got 15 albums out, and there's just, I just constantly just getting in this mode where the stuff is just coming out. And so, the thing that is the most helpful for me is I am able to do a vast majority of what I do here in my room. If I need larger ensembles, I rent out a studio in the city and I go there, and, I can certainly write out the scores and print them out myself, but I oftentimes send my MIDI sessions off to a friend of mine who's an expert engraver, and that's because that's a lot of time to engrave music is really boring work for me.
Now, Gideon, what I'm hearing over here from our friend Pete is that this is a man who is not afraid of technology and being able to use it to get the most out of his own work as a creator.
No, I totally get that. And no, I'm not either. It's just AI is a totally different thing. But I actually want to take us in a totally different direction. Can I do that, Ryan?
You can.
Pete, let me ask you a question. Here's the problem that I'm having. You didn't know this was a therapy session, did you? We'll send you $275 at the end. I'm unable to fall in love musically anymore. And what I mean by that, and I'm curious if you're capable of falling in love musically. And what I mean by that is, when I was younger, I fell in love with Steely Dan because my band is a lot like Steely Dan and McCoy Tyner and John Scofield, who I played with actually. And I worship these musicians, whether it was McCoy Tyner, John Scofield, Bob Dylan, Steely Dan, it doesn't matter. These guys engaged me, these bands engaged me in a way that I'm forever grateful for. But when I listen to music now, I'm not saying there aren't great bands, and I'm not saying there aren't great pop acts and fusion acts, and there isn't some great classical music. Of course there is. But I'm not able to fall in love and worship any of these musicians. Not the way I can worship Ravel or Steely Dan or whatever, Jimi Hendrix. And I'm wondering, given how much music you've made and the fact that you, maybe even a little like me, have a pretty diverse music background, you're obviously, a lot of theory. Are you still able to fall in love with any new bands or any new music in the way that you were in your formative musical years? For me, my honest answer, and it makes me sound like a closed down curmudgeon, but my honest answer is no. And I keep going backwards to fall in love again and discovering people from earlier times. So if you get my drift, I'm interested in hearing, and it's sort of a backdoor way of saying, what do you think of today's music? But you get my drift. I'm interested to hear your response
you
to
could
that
just say,
question.
what do you think of today's music? That would be really right to the point there.
That's another one. Yeah.
He was trying to be more diplomatic about it.
No, it's both.
I actually, to be honest with you, I think that there's a lot of great music being made now. I don't think that there's a lot of great music that you are exposed, that gets a lot of major exposure. That's the way I look at it. There's a lot of music that gets a lot of exposure that is produced by a handful of people, and so they all tend to sound the same. But there's a lot of great music being made. There's a lot of great musicians out there that perform amazing music. And so, I remember, like, about 10 years ago, I really got into Lake Street Dive.
Sure.
I really thought that they were great. Seen them multiple times. I've seen the Derek Truck, Susan Tedeschi band many times. I like this band Goose that's out of Connecticut.
Yep.
So there's sort of a lot of music there that I really like. And I also I fall in love with a lot of people that I work with that I think are amazing talents. And, I'm more focused in on creating music than I am on consuming music. I consumed a lot of music when I was younger, and I still listen to music a lot, but I'm into creating music now, and I don't really want to have anybody else's music influence me too much. So I don't really listen to what's on the radio. I don't want to be current. I don't want any of those things. I want to do what I want to do, and just get better at doing that. I've just if I listen to music, it's going to be things that are foreign to most people. Like I would listen to African music, or I would listen to Indian music, Asian Indian music, or I'd listen to synthesizer music that's not mainstream, right? And I'm more interested in being a creative artist than being a consumer of media. That's sort of where my mind is focused on right now. So I don't really. And I do know that there is great music being made. I see it. We have students at the college that are incredible musicians, and they have less and less opportunity to go out in the world and do anything with that.
Yeah.
But it's the problem for me is that the corporate takeover of radio, where two companies own a vast majority of the radio stations and suits do all the programming, has sort of ruined what's on the air all the time. In the heyday of FM radio, which was the early 1970s when I was a kid,
Yeah.
you would have DJs who would go out of their way to find music and present it to their audience. And so you could be listening to WNEW FM in New York, and they could play, Vince Gelza could start off with playing something from a John Lennon album, then go into Miles Davis, then go into like an opera cut, like a Pavarotti or something like that. And you'd hear all this different disparate music all together. And the thing that all tied it together was that it was all high quality music. And it's the same thing with a lot of the record labels, right? When you look at the history of a label like Atlantic Records, they were started by musicians.
Yep.
And Ahmet Ertegun and Arif Mardin, these were people that could read and write music.
Yep.
Right. And they worked with promoted great artists. That their thought was like, if we make great music, people will like it, as opposed to what I think is happening now, which is we're going to tell you what you like, and that was good. We're going to do the same exact thing in a different key. We're going to do the same exact thing with a different singer. And therefore there's a huge homogeneity of sound, right? So that's what's being presented to the public. And also the fact that music has become free is another issue, because when you're going out to spend money on music, you're going to research and find things that you really like, so as opposed to just putting on a playlist on Spotify, it doesn't cost you anything. So,
oh my gosh,
that's my opinion on all that.
I mean, Pete, the fact that you gave us all of this gold, like these amazing topics about, how corporatism is sucking the life out of FM radio and the music buying experience and record labels. And now we're at a time and we don't get to pull on these conversational threads, breaks my heart. Pete, there are so many more topics I want to talk to you about. We need to bring you and your amazing audio and video quality back very, very soon so we can talk more about I have a long list of things I want to talk to you about, but we're about to lose radio. So I just want to tell people they can check out your album Spirit. It's available now. They can find out more by visiting PeteCalandramusic.com. And I ask you sincerely to come back real soon so we can keep the conversation going. But before we let you go, real quick, let me close with our final question here. Do you have any last tips to share with the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Yeah, learn how to create your own content.
Absolutely right.
That's very simple, very short.
Yep.
Like I did. I learned all this technology. I'm in my studio now. I can create everything myself. I can edit video. I can edit music. I can record music. I can mix music as well as write it. So, I can master music. I can just do, like my album, Spirit, I engineered, mixed, and mastered the whole album. I've created my own artwork, everything about it. So I would say be able to create your own content.
Truly an original work. Pete, it has been an honor speaking with you. Our thanks to Pete Calandra, Gideon King, producer Lauren. Thanks to all of you viewers and listeners for checking out Break the Business. We'll see you next week.